There have been a plethora of agreements recently between Australia and Pacific nations, including with PNG. And as you mentioned, back in late 2023, the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese and James Marape, his PNG counterpart, actually signed what was a pretty sweeping defence agreement. Now, that agreement will see Australia, for example, helping PNG with things like training, restoring its own internal security by helping it to boost policing numbers, as well as work on its judiciary. But that agreement was not a legally binding treaty. Australia was pushing for that originally, but decided to back away because of some of the potential hurdles it might face. Now what we've got is essentially an announcement from the government that today it will resume, or it will start negotiations on a fully fledged binding treaty with PNG. Now, if that does get signed, it would be quite significant because it would really entrench Australia as PNG's main security ally. It would have binding force, and if some of the commitments that are actually in this 2023 agreement are repeated in this one, for example, the commitment that Australia and PNG have made to consult with one another and come up with solutions should they face any security threats, if that's put in a binding document, then that would have some real impact and real weight. Now, not only, of course, have we seen these defence agreements, but also you might remember we had last year, only about 2 or 3 months ago, an announcement that Australia would give an NRL team to PNG in return for strategic assurances, which were again aimed very firmly at stopping China from establishing a military or policing foothold in PNG. So there are plenty of agreements here. The government's leaving nothing to chance. It wants to do everything it possibly can to build up this lattice work of agreements to try and keep China at bay.
Yeah, you've really touched on it there, Stephen. What is the government hoping to achieve with all of these agreements?
Look, aside from keeping China out, which I think is perhaps the overwhelming rationale behind this, there are other things that Australia wants to do, and one of those is to try and help PNG with its internal and external security. PNG has been roiled repeatedly by unrest over recent years. We've seen, for example, serious incidents of unrest in the highlands. We've seen massacres take place. We've got real questions, particularly in parts of PNG, around its capacity for internal law and order. Now, the defence agreement that was signed in 2023 was really aimed at filling some of those gaps. I suspect this treaty will be more focused on external security, but we'll have to wait and see. But at the heart of this is strategic denial. It's keeping Australia enshrined as the #1 security partner for PNG, doing what Australia can to ensure it remains stable, and also, of course, keeping China out.
And do we know how long these latest negotiations are likely to take, and what are the chances of success for Australia?
Look, it's difficult to say. We don't have a definitive timeline for these negotiations. The ABC's been told that both countries want to get on with this quickly and get it done at pace, but whether we're talking about 6 months, a year or longer is difficult to say at this stage. As to the chances of success, well, you'd have to say with the current Prime Minister, James Marape, in power, the prospects are pretty good. This government, Mr Marape with his Foreign Minister, Justin Tkatchenko, have been more willing to strike agreements with Australia that previous governments might not have contemplated. PNG's got a long tradition of fierce foreign policy independence and, to a degree, non-alignment. It's never wanted to take sides in strategic competition. Now, that remains, but this government has been much clearer, perhaps because of Australian pressure, that it will not contemplate security agreements with China. They've put that on the record. So even though there are some hurdles to this, including the fact that PNG's parliament will scrutinise any agreement very closely, it's got constitutional arrangements that really mandate that, the government may feel it has an opportunity here to strike whilst it's in a very good shape with PNG and while the relationship is in a rosy health, and it may want to strike while the iron is hot.
Stephen Jedgetts, thanks for the details.